It sounds like this is kind of like a technocratic approach, right? Where you have these experts at the helm, the heads of these organizations, the FDA, the NIH, the CDC, the World Health Organization, they're all at the top and they're directing everything downwards, and if we look at Hayek, for example, in The Use of Knowledge in Society, he talks about local knowledge, and he talks about how everything works best when it's more decentralized, and you have, let's say, local hospitals working with the best kind of measures that they could use in their particular situation, that local people would understand best how to mitigate things. But the complete opposite happened, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think both parts of that are really, really right, Kate. So on the one hand, you had the center. You had Francis Collins, the head of the National Institute of Health, 4 days after we wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, writing the email that you referred to, in fact, bleakly, that we were fringe epidemiologists, three of us, me, Martin Kulldorff of Harvard University, and Sunetra Gupta of Oxford University, Stanford, Harvard, Oxford, that we were fringe epidemiologists. And then calling for a devastating takedown of the premises. And what happened next was essentially a smear campaign. Reporters started calling me, asking me why I want to let the virus rip. Essentially, why did I want to kill grandma? The center reacted really, really negatively to it, as if it were an existential threat.
yeah.
If they're right, we're fringe. Why even bother? They were, I think, embarrassed to that. Somebody has spoken up and said, look, this was a great mistake that we had made during the lockdown to impose this society-wide lockdown. And on the other side of this, you speak of local knowledge. That's exactly what the Great Barrington Declaration was calling for. How do you do focus protection? We know from the epidemiology that there's a 1,000-fold difference in the risk of severe outcomes from this infection if you're older versus if you're younger. It's a real threat, this disease, if you're older, at least before in October 2020, it certainly was. Whereas if you are younger, it's much less of a threat. In fact, for children, there are many, many threats in their lives that are much worse caused by the lockdowns than the disease itself.
Yes.
But the details of how do you accomplish focus protection, those details are highly dependent on local knowledge. Right, so it's going to be very different in downtown LA, and in Los Angeles, where there's many working class people living in smaller homes in multi-generational communities, versus in Billings, Montana, where there's a lot more, a lot less of those multi-ethnic homes and seniors living alone, or places like nursing homes. It'll depend on the physical infrastructure of the places where people are living. It's going to require deep local knowledge, far beyond what I have. And the idea of the Great Barrington Declaration wasn't to put out a complete plan in every detail, in every community, in every place. The idea of the Great Barrington Declaration was to engage local public health in a conversation. It was a call to creativity, to ask, how do you protect older people in your communities? How do you protect vulnerable people in your community? How do you protect people who have, certain chronic conditions that make them at higher risk? How do you maybe restructure the nature of work so that younger people who are lower risk can continue to do work, and then find ways to accommodate older, higher risk people when the disease is spreading rapidly, for instance? Deploy resources, whatever they are, therapeutic resources, preventative resources, whatever they are, in places where they'll make the most difference. The principle was one of, in effect, was freedom, right? The idea wasn't to force people into confine older people into quarantine camps or some such nonsense. The idea was to provide tools, resources, and knowledge so that they could protect themselves and others with those resources, rather than trying to impose a lockdown which devastated the poor, the vulnerable, children, and working class.